Adaptations are a tricky business. Anytime someone wants to adapt a story from one medium to another, changes inevitably have to be made. This effectively comes with a built-in ship of Theseus paradox. How much of the source material can be altered before it stops resembling the original work altogether? The question most people typically ask instead, though, tends to be more along the lines of, why was this adaptation necessary in the first place? Alternatively, what is the benefit of even trying to adapt a story at all? The question I want to ask, though, is what separates a good adaptation from a bad one? It's a rather tricky and nuanced topic, to be sure. Some adaptations are beloved, while others tend to be widely frowned upon. Of course, what even makes a good adaptation in the first place is inevitably going to vary per person. Now, I'm of the opinion that anyone should be free to reimagine, reinterpret, or revise a story however they wish, so long as it's not being done in a blatant act of plagiarism. After all, stories have been changing and evolving for as long as we've had them. That said, it goes without saying that not every retelling is necessarily going to stick the landing. For example, let's take the recent Devil May Cry Netflix series. Now, I know this show has its fans and defenders, but a broad majority of the DMC fan base has been less than enthused with many of the choices made. The decision to explain away all of the magic with sci-fi jargon, the choice to make demons an allegory for an oppressed people instead of just being monsters from hell, even the choice to make ladies swear more than an angry sailor, so much of it tends to come across as antithetical to what gives Devil May Cry its identity. Again, there's nothing inherently wrong with different interpretations, but when you stray this hard from the source material, it's little wonder why longtime fans are so upset. Now, the argument does tend to get thrown around a lot that a work should be judged by its own merits, and I understand the sentiment, but that's also kind of impossible to completely do with an adaptation. Like, the very concept invites comparison to what it's adapting. Even if it's a separate continuity, or a unique spin on the source material, or an alternate universe, or whatever, again, how many alterations can you really get away with before it's totally divorced from the original? To bring up another example, Batman has been adapted into all sorts of media over the years, with literally dozens of reinterpretations to his name. Sometimes he's goofier, sometimes he's more serious, but fans generally agree that the worst portrayals lean too much in one direction or the other. Yes, Batman is inherently a dark character given his backstory, but there's a reason so many people hold his no-killing rule as sacred. Regardless of your stance on it, that moral code is baked into Batman's legacy. He's not just an angry vigilante out to beat up criminals. He's a man trying to make sure that no one else has to face the same pain and tragedy that he went through. There's a rather iconic quote from Overly Sarcastic Productions claiming that if you can't imagine your version of Batman comforting a child, then you're just writing the Punisher in a funny hat. Most fans generally tend to agree with that assessment, which makes it especially hilarious that plenty of people seem fine with the notion of absolute Batman casually punting a kid into the stratosphere. Like, I know it's an alternate universe, but is that not functionally the same thing as a reinterpretation of the character? Of course, this Batman acts differently because he had a different backstory, but that's true for all the absolute DC heroes. Despite that, this entire run has been pretty well received despite the radical changes. And on the topic of beloved adaptations, how about Howl's Moving Castle? One of Studio Ghibli's many classics, the movie has become so iconic that some people don't even know that's based on a novel of the same name. If you did know that, then you might also be aware of the fact that Miyazaki's version of the story changes a lot of key elements, and arguably even goes out of its way to change the core message of the tale to an anti-war story. In spite of that, the movie is still pretty universally beloved by just about everyone, including fans of the original book. There are millions of examples I could draw from on both sides of the spectrum, but no matter how many I may list, the question remains. What is it that truly separates a good adaptation from a bad one? Well, there may not be just one simple answer. But for me, I'd say a major factor to take into consideration is quite simply respect for the source material. As someone who does semi-regular rewrite content on this channel, I absolutely understand the desire to put your own mark on a project. After all, it is your retelling. However, anyone who doesn't know about or understand the source material, or worse, is actively dismissive of it, stands to gain very little from trying to adapt it in any form. Just look at the Halo TV show, which gained a great deal of notoriety from the simple fact that the creatives had next to no knowledge of the Halo franchise. Like, I know Halo might be considered by and large a more casual game, the lore is generally considered secondary or even irrelevant to many players. However, there are still a lot of people who genuinely care about Halo's story and expanded universe, myself included. For me, the decision to deviate from the existing story was far less offensive than the apparent dismissal of it altogether. Just having a guy who looks like Master Chief doesn't do much good if he doesn't embody the spirit of Master Chief. John 117 isn't a beloved character just because he's a cool space marine. He's beloved because he shows, time and again, that there's a good person beneath all that high-tech armor. Art is subjective. There's no one right way to tell a story, and there's no one right way to enjoy one either. However, every story, even one widely considered to be bad, has appeal to someone out there. If you plan to retell that story without understanding its appeal, without understanding the core of its identity, then I think you're already on the road to a bad retelling. A good adaptation doesn't have to be wildly faithful to the source, but I think it should at least show respect to the material it's adapting. If you make a product with disdain or irreverence, that comes through in the work itself, and audiences can feel that. Doesn't matter if they're longtime fans of the property or total newcomers. As the saying goes, if you try to please everyone, you'll just end up pleasing no one. But what do you all think? What do you believe makes a good or bad adaptation, and why? What would you consider to be an example of either category? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and until next time, stay bright.